So tomorrow is Super Tuesday, when 15 states, including us here in North Carolina, will vote in the Republican and Democratic primaries. Many of you have probably cast your ballot already, maybe during that early voting period. Most of you are going to probably do it tomorrow, and many of you probably won't vote at all. I believe you should. I think we often take that right for granted, but I'm not here to pontificate about the importance of voting. Honestly, if you're a little disillusioned by the whole thing, I kind of get it. You know, all the polls right now say that these primary races are kind of already a sure thing. A High Point University poll has Donald Trump beating Nikki Haley by 47 points, as Mark Robinson winning the Republican primary for governor by 13 points, and Josh Stein in the Democratic primary by 41 points, a huge margin. A Meredith College poll has Robinson by at least 20 and Stein up by about 30. So, you know, there you have it. According to the polls, the race is all but over before the ballots are even counted. But Dan, don't you remember? These polls, they're full of it. 2016, right? The polls were wrong. They've been wrong before. They could be wrong again. And that is, well, that's absolutely true. You know, ABC, Ipsos, CBS, NBC, Pew Research, CNN, Fox, all of them had Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump, and all of them were wrong. Maybe some of you remember the 1980 presidential election, Jimmy Carter versus Ronald Reagan. The polls there had Carter winning by as many as 30 points. And in the end, Reagan won by 9. So yeah, sometimes the polls miss. They're not perfect. That said, I can probably give you about, 10,000 examples of when they were right. A 2018 study published in the journal Nature Human Behavior looked at 30,000 polls from all over the world over the course of 75 years. They found, contrary to conventional wisdom, the recent performance of polls has not been outside the ordinary. If anything, polling errors are getting smaller on average. A 2020 study from Cal Berkeley found polls are spot on at least 60% of the time. That's right, 60% of the time they work every time. Yes, that number was a little lower than we were expecting to hear, but it still kind of backs up the main point. Most of the time, polls are correct. You can think of it a little bit like forecasting the weather, for instance. I mean, meteorologists use science and data to predict the weather. The end result isn't always perfect, but it's pretty darn close. And we trust it enough to plan our day. If you think it might rain, you grab an umbrella. If you think it's going to be cold outside, you grab a jacket. If you think it might snow, you completely lose your mind and you buy enough toilet paper, milk, and bread to overstock a doomsday bunker. My point is, weather forecasts can kind of help you understand polling. They're right more often than they're wrong, and they can impact your behavior. I spoke to an expert about this, a social psychologist and political science professor at Stanford.
There is what we call the wisdom of the crowds, that phenomenon where a group of people tend to be smarter as a whole than the individuals in it, taken by themselves. And polls tell us the wisdom of the crowds. And if you've got a candidate early on who's polling at 3 percentage points, if they've had their opportunity to get their message out and people are saying no, thank you, that is helpful for the process.
Look at that stack of papers in the background of the shot. Between his gig at Stanford and the literal mountain range of documents behind him, it's pretty clear this guy's a lot smarter than I am. And the scholars at Stanford know what they are talking about. A different professor there did an experiment on how polls affect behavior. People were asked a handful of public policy questions, first without seeing any polls, and again after seeing polling results. When the participants learned that experts favored a position, opinions shifted by 11%. Opinions from people like them, well, that shifted opinions by 6%. And when the poll showed a majority favored the opposite side of an issue, opinions then shifted again by 8%. The experiment's conclusion, basically voters are searching for the wisdom of the crowds, exactly what the professor was talking about. He also says polls aren't so much about picking an early winner as they are about providing new information to help voters come Election Day.
If there were no scores, if you didn't know how the teams were doing, I think we'd all be less attentive. And what we've learned from really good scientific research is that by turning politics into a sporting match and grabbing the attention of Americans who are like, who's ahead, who's behind, in what the researchers call horse race polling, that people learn about politics. They learn about the state of the country. They learn facts that they need. Like, you can't help but watch a football game and not learn something about the history of the quarterbacks. And so by the time you have to cast your vote, you're smarter about the people and the country that you're voting on.
A study in the Journal of Consumer Research found something similar. Quote, depending on which candidate voters expect to win, polls can have no effect, lead voters to change expectations, or lead voters to change their preferences and their voting behavior. And it's not just your behavior that's changing. It's also the candidates. And some may say endangering a staple of discourse and diplomacy along with it, the debate. For instance, Donald Trump, as you probably know, did not do one debate before tomorrow's primary because the polls told him he didn't have to. Neither did Mark Robinson on his way to the governor's race. And I don't blame them. Who would? If you were in the lead, why would you risk it? And a debate is a risk because debates are special. Let's look at it this way. Here are all the different types of ways candidates get their messages out. You got social media. That's where they control the posts and the comment section. They have the control there. Then there are the ads that we see all the time, where they carefully craft a one-sided argument, more control. Rallies, where they stay on message. They speak to their supporters who aren't there to challenge their ideas. Once again, they're in control. Even with media stories, those can carry bias, sometimes inadvertently, like a soundbite that's edited for time, and sometimes blatantly, with certain networks lobbing softballs to one party and hand grenades to the other. Debates, though, debates are unique. They're raw. You can't hide from the things you don't know in a debate or be protected. And that's especially powerful in the primary. What I mean is, when people debate across the aisle, Republicans against Democrats, the ideas are usually as polar as the parties. But when you debate within the party, that's when you figure out the details, what kind of Republican you are, what kind of Democrat you are. Let me know what you think about all this. Do debates still matter? Do people care enough to make them matter? Send me an email, dan@WRAL.com. You can find me on social media. You can send me a message on Facebook. Tell me what is on your mind, and we will go in depth.